Hello and welcome to my channel. In this one I'm going to do a large charcoal portrait of a badger. The black and white fur of the animal makes for a very nice contrast, but to further enhance that contrast I made some parts of the background even darker. First I'm going to do a sketch with a graphite pencil and then I'll switch to charcoal pencils. I'm working on Master Touch sketching paper, about 9 times 12 inches in size, and I'm going to be using Master Touch woodless charcoal pencils. So like I said, I'm going to make some parts of the background very dark, and the goal will be to increase the contrast between the lighter parts of the main subject's fur and the background. The reference will be in the description if you want to check it out. Now for the background here I'm going to use charcoal powder. I'm just going to create some charcoal powder by sharpening one of my woodless charcoal pencils. And once I have a decent amount of material here, I'm going to start blending. And the blending tool that I'm going to use for the most part here is going to be my finger. The quickest and probably the best blending tool you have, except that it's not that great for precision. So for some of the smaller details I'm going to have to use some other techniques. Now notice that I'm pushing the charcoal over the edge, over the outline of my sketch. That's because I'm going to be drawing some lighter fur with erasers, and I need to push the charcoal a little bit over that edge so that once I start drawing the lighter fur, those lighter hairs would stand out against a dark background. So I need to have contrast and clean edges. Anyway, that's the upper part of the background. That's going to be a little bit darker, and the reason why it's going to be a bit darker is because the upper part of the head, which is catching light from above, will be lighter, and the lower part will be a little bit darker. That's why I'm going to make that part of the background lighter, to increase that contrast. So it's all about trying to make your subject pop out of the background. So here I did the nose. Now I'm adding a bit more charcoal powder to the background here, but like I said, I'm not going to use quite as much here. I'm going to use a little bit less, and I'm going to try to spread it with brushes as well as my fingers. In addition to that, I'm also going to be using some willow charcoal, because that's a little bit lighter and it's easier to manipulate. Now I'm going to do the eye, and I switched to soft charcoal pencil. By the way, I'm using 2 grades, the soft and the medium charcoal pencil, but for some of these very dark details I used soft charcoal pencil. For the most part I tend to use the medium charcoal pencil as my main drawing tool, but I tend to reserve the soft charcoal pencil for some of the darkest bits. Here we're going to have a little bit more of those darker areas. That's why I'm going to use more of the soft charcoal pencil. So the fur is black and white, and the badger has almost like these 2 stripes going across the head and the eyes. So I'm going to draw that stripe of darker fur here using the charcoal pencil. And notice how I'm pulling my strokes. I'm not just trying to fill in that space with the darker value. I'm actually pulling it in the form of clumps of fur, trying to draw something that kind of looks like fur. It's not going to stay like that. I'm going to do some blending and a bit of refining, but I feel like if I lay down this shape first it's going to make my job easier a bit later, because I already have those edges that look like fur. Once that is done, I blend with a brush. I normally use flat brushes for most of the work, especially when drawing fur, and as I pull them back and forth, they soften the marks and create an illusion of volume, because you can't draw every single hair, or you can't draw every single clump of hair. That makes the whole thing a bit quicker and easier. I'm also going to push in some charcoal into the lighter areas as well, because I can't leave them completely white and I can't leave them without any texture. So I need something to work with. I need a little bit of value to work with, and once I add a bit of value, I can pull these lighter marks. Now, I started by pulling some lighter marks around the ears, because they are sticking out and they stand out against this darker background, and these lighter hairs on top, I want these to stand out. And the thing that's kind of making things a little bit difficult for me is that my eraser picks up some charcoal and I have to clean it up every couple of strokes. Otherwise I'm going to muddy everything and it's not going to look as bright as I want it to. I'm using two kinds of erasers. For the most part I'm using the Kohinoor pencil eraser. It's a rubber eraser in a pencil that can be used like a pencil. And I'm also using a kneaded eraser. The kneaded eraser lifts up charcoal and doesn't leave residue. But the pencil eraser is more convenient because you can pull these strokes more naturally, as if you were drawing with a pencil. Here I'm actually pulling some lighter strokes in this darker area, and the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to make the fur here a bit lighter, because you see, even the darker or black fur, when it's facing the light source, it's going to appear lighter. So it's definitely going to be lighter than the fur that is a little bit further down the head. So you need to pay attention to the light source, and you need to stay consistent with the light source, and both the lighter areas, the areas of lighter fur and the darker fur, need to interact with the light source in a similar way, meaning that whichever is closer to the light source is going to appear lighter, and whatever is further away or facing away from the light source is going to appear darker. I added some more texture to this lighter part of the head, going down the middle of the head between the eyes. And now that I have some darker tones to work with, I'm pulling some lighter strokes using a pencil eraser, creating a more interesting texture of the hair and creating a bit more depth, because when you have that range of value with those lighter marks on top of the darker marks, you create more depth, and the hair, the fur, appears more three-dimensional. A few more lighter strokes here in this patch of darker fur, and a bit more lighter ones here around the nose. The thing is that when you're drawing fur, you want to stay consistent with the length of the fur and the direction of the fur. You have to pay attention to the reference photo, so you have to try to match the length of the fur in different parts of the body and the direction in which it grows. But you want to vary the direction of your strokes ever so slightly so that it looks more natural. Now here's the mouth and the gums. These are also going to be a little bit darker, but the entire lower part of the snout is going to be in the shadow. So the trick that I'm going to use here is I'm going to make the background a bit lighter in that lower part of the drawing. All of the background is dark, but the amount of value is going to vary slightly so that the lighter parts of the badger's head stand out against the darker background, while these darker parts of the badger's head, which are facing down and facing away from the light source, those are going to be darker than the background. So now I'm drawing a little bit more of this darker fur, pulling some very bold strokes with a soft charcoal pencil, and again trying to imitate the appearance of fur at the same time while I'm laying down those areas of darker value. What I like about these charcoal pencils is they allow you to work fairly quickly. This is certainly much faster than graphite or colored pencil, but it's not suitable for any type of drawing. This one works really well with charcoal because you need to bring out that strong contrast, and it's not super complex in terms of details. So this type of artwork, this type of drawing is what lends itself really well to working in charcoal. It's a little bit messy. As you can see, there's a substantial amount of charcoal on the paper, but that's just something you need to get used to when you're working in charcoal. Now you can see how lighter the background is at the bottom. That's why I'm going to take away a bit of value here at the top as well, to create some lighter shapes or suggestions of shapes in the background, just to make that transition between the upper part of the background and the lower part of the background a bit more gradual. And I'm going to make the background darker again here at the very bottom, and I'm going to make sure that the lower part of the well, not the lower part, the chest area and the neck area of the badger kind of blends into that darker background. So the idea here is for those central parts of the portrait, like the snout and the eye and the head area, to stand out in contrast against the background, and to have a lot less contrast around the edges, so that the middle part, the one that should be drawing focus, has the most contrast. So again, it's a trick that I'm using to draw viewers' attention to a certain part of my portrait, and I want to make it look like the rest of the badger's body is almost fading into the dark background. Here I'm adding some more of those hairs in the lighter part of the badger's fur. These I'm adding with a piece of willow charcoal. So I'm using willow charcoal in addition to the charcoal pencils. The willow charcoal is natural charcoal and it's softer. You can see how as I'm blending, everything gets blended very easily. It's easy to move it around because it doesn't really stick to the paper as much, and it's not as dark. But on top of that, I'm going to add some marks with charcoal pencil. This part of the fur here around the shoulder and the chest area, or whatever it is, it's a bit darker, it's more greyish, or rather it's a combination of darker and white hairs, and I'm adding a bit more of these cleaner marks with a medium charcoal pencil. I also need to add at least a few of those in this lighter part of the fur around the cheek area and the cheekbone area. And I'm going to do some blending and I'm going to do some erasing later, but as always, I need to have some darker values first in order to have something to work with, because the lighter marks won't show if you don't have a darker background that they would show up against. This thing that I'm holding now is what's left of my soft charcoal pencil. I had some problems sharpening it, so most of it has broken off. So I'm using this tiny stub to finish the rest of this drawing, and I'm almost using it like a stick. but it's going to get the job done, I think. I usually don't have problems with sharpening these woodless charcoal pencils. It's just that they are definitely softer than graphite pencils, and the soft charcoal pencil is even more difficult to sharpen than the medium one. So if your sharpener is not really sharp, that tends to break the pencils every now and then. But like I said, I will make do with whatever I have at the moment, and I'm doing a bit of blending using a combination of my finger for some of these darker areas and the brushes for some of the lighter areas. The thing about your finger is that it pushes the charcoal really well into the grain of the paper, and it allows you to keep those really dark values. So now I'm going to work a little bit on this fur here to the left and at the bottom with a pencil eraser. I'm going to add a little more depth and detail to it. So I'm pulling these lighter marks on top of those darker areas. I'm not going to make it as light as those white areas. I just want to make it a bit lighter. And I also want to pull some lighter marks within those lighter patches of fur on the head to make them look more natural, because when you do some negative drawing, when you pull those lighter marks on top of the darker values, it makes the hair look more natural, because you expect those lighter clumps of fur to be sticking out of the shadow areas. That's why it's just more natural to work from dark to light in this case. Not that you have much possibility to do that with charcoal. You're kind of limited by what you can erase, but I don't really need to erase that much. A few lighter marks here and there, a few suggestions of those lighter clumps of fur sitting on top of the darker ones will get the job done. Here I'm just finishing the portrait because I'm just adding a bit more value to the neck here so that it would stand out against this lighter part of the background. And I'm adding some final touches to the snout area as well. My signature is going to be here in the lower right corner. I'm going to draw it with my pencil eraser. You can also see that I removed the tape around the drawing, around the paper, and now the drawing is done. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and give me a like. And if you want to see longer videos and a lot more content, hundreds of real-time videos, you should check out my Patreon. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.